supposedly that was already done, I think, Jim.
Yeah, I
And
think-
basically it was just to be able, so the park staff could leave while they're on duty and respond in a county ambulance. That was the big hangup with the federal government, I believe.
Okay.
I'll have to double check that, but I do recollect within the last year or so, we
know we were
renewed
looking-
that one. We always had one,
Yeah,
but I think we just had to renew it.
Yeah, and I mean, you don't wanna rely on them 100%, but I mean,
no,
if we could get them to where they have trained staff, if the, you know, the Park Service will let them leave to respond to Sacramento Pass, you know, that helps.
well, the
That
trying,
helps a lot.
you know, to be sure that, you know, we're doing whatever we need to do with the Baker area.
Yeah. How many park employees do they have that are EMTs?
You know,
Do we have any idea?
Gary might know.
Because Ben's not there.
The big
now,
part is
too.
the issue that we've had with the park is that it's so transient. We have, the EMTs will come in, and by the time they're licensed by the state, they're on to the
They've
next
moved
park.
on to the next. Yeah.
Right now, I believe we have, well, except for me, they're all park employees. And I think there's three that live in the community, and then there's one that's also the park ranger. And so it's, you know, with the park, they go off for meetings and out of the area quite often. And so it is pretty tight trying to get it covered.
And it's tough, it's one of those things, you know, it comes down to finances too, and I mean, what do you do, cause there's not enough call volume to justify having like a full-time service there, or even a contract full-time service, and it's just one of those struggles you gotta deal with, you know?
Yeah, it's one of the definite struggles with rural Nevada.
It is,
mean,
yeah, and I mean, it
so
ain't just
few of us
West
is so
Pine County,
spread
it's
out.
everywhere.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, we cover, there's just so much territory to cover here.
So,
Yeah.
That's all I have. County manager, get creative. All right.
okay.
Pat, thank you very much. All right, move on to item 2, discussion for possible action on direction to recruit for a full-time district fire chief, or consider making a position part-time and or partnering with the city of Ely through additional funding and agreement to fulfill district chief responsibilities. Mike Weevil, county manager.
Chairman, this is what happens when you get creative. It's complicated because there's a lot of emotions, a lot of tradition, a lot of history, and, you know, this action item is only to discuss direction also. You know, there's no established solution to this yet. Traditionally, we've had a full-time fire chief when we had staff. We've had emergency managers and full-time fire chiefs, 2 individuals. We've had a fire chief who acts as an emergency manager, and we're gonna discuss emergency manager later in the agenda. And then, you know, just looking at, you know, the city is making runs to the county almost on all the calls unless they get turned back, like, because it's handled. And so one of the things to at least discuss and see if there's a possibility in getting creative to solve some of the solutions is, we recruit, right now, we have a building services agreement for a building inspector with the city of Ely, right? Where we pay part of his salary, or we pay for the truck, and, you know, the city pays for his office space, and there's this combined agreement. And we have a building inspector. He's not the city building inspector who's working for the county. He's a county building inspector when he's serving in the county. And he's the city building inspector when he's serving in this. It's a cooperative agreement. And so looking at that model, the question was raised, you know, if we put money and recruit and hire a county fire chief and put money into it, but have an agreement with the city where he is also a city and serves in the city and serves a shift in the city, that when there's a call in the county, this individual is the one who, should he be on duty, he responds. If he's not on duty, he has the liberty to respond because he's a certain kind of employee. There's so many questions about an approach to this model that we haven't settled yet because this is the first time it's being discussed in the public. And so that's why it's just for discussion, it's just for direction to see if this is something we want to even look at, or explore the city. The city knows nothing about this. If this were something that the county was interested in looking at, then the next step would be go and get Pat and the mayor and the city councilman and say, what are your guys' needs? Would this be something that would work for you as well? And how would they serve as a county fire chief so that we're making sure it's not just a city employee who's checking on our county volunteers? Because that's the problem. We don't want that. We need a county fire chief that also has, you know, duties and responsibilities and training and is serving in the city as well. And I mean, Yeah, there's a county and a city, but there's less than 10,000 people total. We are one community, and sometime we're gonna have to get over this. And it's difficult to talk about because there's been so much bad history. And we're trying to, the city has shown through this agreement that they are willing and responsible to come out and take care of county residents on this agreement. It's been working, there's not without problems, but it's been working pretty good.
It's come a long ways.
A long
It's
way.
come a long ways.
A long way.
That's, yes.
And I hear and I'm sensitive to the fact that we don't want to delegate the city to manage our volunteers. I understand that. Our volunteers, there's a lot of pride and history there. And we wanna see the best, most vibrant volunteer stations with functional new apparatus, highly trained EMTs, ambulances, fire truck, everyone's certified, they know their SCBA's, they know how to, work with the city and everyone's cross-trained. That's the goal to achieve. And then there's morale and recruitment and the numbers are going back up, because everyone knows the history. There was a core of volunteers that were served vigorously in this community. And then when, arguably, depending on who you ask, when we hired professional firefighters and had a crew out of Station 1, there was less need for the volunteers to have that responsibility, it seemed like, because we had a hired crew that was serving the community. And then, so there was some drop off there. And then when that was closed and those positions were eliminated, there was more attrition. Volunteers, that every time there's a change, there's gonna be less excitement for volunteerism because it feels like their organization is suffering, right? And so, this is just for discussion to kind of even get some ideas, some fresh ideas of how to solve this problem. There's no problem with hiring a full-time fire chief. There isn't. We can have one and that'd be fine. That's how we've operated. And the idea originally was to have a full-time fire chief that went their day, Monday they're in Baker, Tuesday they're in McGill, Wednesday they're in Lund, and they're just visiting the volunteers, checking on the station, looking at, putting in POs for replacement for apparatus parts that are broken, paying the Suburban propane bills, it's a lot to do. It's a department head position. And so, it's just for discussion because there is a lot of talk on how we're gonna continue to work together, how we're gonna solve the fire chief position. It is most of the funding for the previous fire chief. I'll talk about
That's
that
what,
for a
I
second.
thought it would be important to explain that.
So the previous fire chief is also the emergency manager. 62% or more of the salary of that position was funded through emergency management and for the purposes of emergency management. $15,000 was the salary came from the general fund, $15,000 came from the fire district. Only $30,000 is what we have in our budget right now for a fire chief. So no matter what direction we go, we're gonna have to look at contingency to augment it if we're gonna hire, whether we partner, whether we hire full-time. And the only way we're gonna get around the budget is if we do a part-time position. And it's kind of an experiment right now with Court to see if we can swing it for part-time. And I'll tell you, he's working on it every day. And so it really is probably a full-time position. And there's so much more we can do, especially with training and certifications. And if the right individual who's motivated can get in all the different fire departments, they can keep themselves busy. And so I'm not saying that we shouldn't hire a full-time chief. I just want to at least have a conversation with the commission about the direction it wants to go.
Very good. Any questions or comments from Ryan?
I think that we ought to explore all of these options, to tell you the truth. Because I don't know if it's gonna be a one-size-fits-all, especially right now. So I think that we ought to explore it all, the way this reads.
Yeah, especially in the interim right now, we're just,
Yeah, that's
we're
what I'm
kind of,
talking about, that
it's my feeling that I think it's really important. You alluded to the changes that had occurred and how each one of these changes has its what makes its waves in our volunteerism. I think it's really important that we kind of stay the course with what we've been doing and we avoid changing. And we avoid those kind of waves that wash down to the volunteers. And I think first and foremost, our focus should be for a full-time chief that supports our departments. And if we have to make some budget changing and do some augmentation to make that happen, I think we have to take the necessary steps. we're still in a building stage with these, and in order to build, we've gotta have the volunteers being able to count on us.
And I'll be honest with you, I was thinking about this and had the TV on as I was going through some of this, and with some of the fire rescue stuff on, and they call it a unified fire district, and I thought, maybe something like that might be considered. I know that there's a lot of the history, you know, and I understand that. But the here and now, I don't know it to incorporate everybody. Part of what we're talking about is incorporating everybody. And so it's a unified, and that's just throwing that out
Yeah.
there.
I like the idea. It's, I just, I worry about what ripples that will cause.
I
I
agree.
mean, and it's going to require a whole new look at how we manage from the top end. I'm sure Pat's not ready to step up and just say, okay, I'm just gonna take on 6 new stations. You ready for that one, Pat? Makes retirement look pretty good, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, no,
So-
I get it. I get
Yeah.
it. I do.
So,
And to be clear, it was never gonna be, Pat, you know, that's not
No.
what I came from. You know, it would be create a new position and add an additional one at the city.
Yeah.
Who was primarily funded
Add a
by
layer,
the county
yeah.
to be the county chief, but he also served
Yeah.
shifts at the city. Because one of the things we haven't accomplished since the changes is to really increase the outlying departments do the training. And some of them do really good training. But I haven't been able to get the volunteers in good numbers at the city's firehouse, because you have a professional crew here that's doing trainings, and they're led by a medical director, and they have all the resources in the world, and they're really good at what they do. And there's an amazing resource there, but I haven't been able to get the volunteers to really take advantage of that. And they have various reasons. And so that would only increase the service we're able to give to the public, is if you take your McGill, let's just talk about McGill. If you had a good body of volunteers out there, 20 people, you know, half a dozen EMTs, firefighter, a handful of them are firefighter 1, trained to enter buildings, they're doing test fits, they're just professionalized, then the public who's motoring on the highway, north of them, are gonna be better protected. The public who lives in McGill is gonna be better protected, and there's gonna be a faster response, and there's gonna be better working. I mean, the city and the county already work pretty good when they show up. I don't think there's been a problem with that.
They do.
That's been a good solution, because that has been a problem for decades, and now that's already getting better.
Just the political part.
Yeah, and
Messes
so,
with it.
Shannon, I don't, maybe we're not ready for it yet, and that's fine. And I just wanna start seeing some of these solutions where people can work together, and that we have better training opportunities, and we get people showing the training. And then there's the budgetary concerns. If we're gonna go ahead and recruit for a full-time chief, I need to know that I gotta work with Kathy, and we'll come up the next meeting and say, we gotta pull this from contingency, this amount, you know, whatever it's gonna be. That's fine.
the one thing, I think as far as our volunteers and getting them into the trainings and stuff, I think those are just some fairly simple solutions to that don't start at the top end, I think they're bottom end. I think we assist the people in getting here. We get assist the people that are coming from Baker, they're gonna have to be here for a full weekend of training. We help them out with a little fuel, we give them a place to, we work out a deal where we give them a place to stay. We put our money where our mouth is, and we make it so that that's not so burdensome for them. So if there's 2 days of training on the weekend, the guy doesn't drive 60 miles in, train all day, drive 60 miles home, drive back 60 miles in. Let's see if we can't work out some solutions to make it easier for them. And in the long run, we might spend a few bucks, but if we create a reason for it to take some of the weight off of them, they might sign up and go. But I think our structure at the top, I think we've got to be really careful how we go about this. Pat?
One of the biggest things I think you really gotta do, no matter whatever direction you go, from what I've seen over like the last 15 years, you really gotta get somebody who is trying to get the training going, okay? Because I've always said, anybody could be a member of a volunteer fire department. But if you don't go to training, you ain't gonna be a volunteer firefighter. It's a big difference between being a member and being able to do the job. Because at 2 in the morning, when someone calls 911, They don't care who it is. When you show up in that truck with the flashing lights, they don't know if you're a volunteer, you're paid or what, but they expect you to solve their problem. And if you're not trained and you get there and you can't do what needs to be done, you're not helping nobody. So that's something that's really gotta be, I think, as a key thing to whatever direction you guys go. It's none of my thing, but I think that is a key thing that you really need to look at, is getting this training to the outlying areas. So,
I got one more comment to add.
Okay, you go first.
What's your policy when it's on BLM or Forest Service?
well, BLM, for my policy, for my department is I've told Raymond at the BLM, is if you got people, we're not going. If they've got people out of the area and they call us, I'll send one truck with 3 guys, we'll go do an initial attack, and when their resources show up, we're leaving. That ain't really our job. If it's close to housing or something like that, yeah, we're gonna go to protect structures, but we're not gonna worry about how much sagebrush burns. At least I'm not.
Thank you.
I had just one more thing, and it really, it pertains to the Ely Fire Department. Yesterday, I have a very, very good friend, he's 94 years old, in McGill. He went to take his Meals on Wheels to his house. He found him unresponsive. He was not on this planet, so to speak. Ely showed up. They stayed with him, got him back to where he was speaking. This is why it's important that we utilize our options with the city of Ely, because they did come to McGill yesterday afternoon, and they brought back my friend, and he's back semi-okay. But as we move forward, and I want to make this as brief as I can so that we can move forward, I think that one of the things we should really look at, if we go to a full-time fire chief, is we recruit for a fire chief / EMS person. One person to do the 2 jobs, that he can relate to the outlying stations. He will be there for the county to go with the city. But if we go that route, and I'm just bringing it out for the discussion, which is what we're on, let's look at probably combining 2 jobs into one, which would be a fire chief / EMS director, because most of our calls are EMS, let's be honest about it, they are. So let's just, for the sake of discussion, kind of leave it at that, or at least that's what I'd like to do. Leave it at that, to where we maintain our status with the city of Ely, because they go to Lund, Baker, and everywhere else, and they're doing a great job. Frank's around today because of what happened yesterday, and I'm all for all that. So let's look at our discussion item and leave it at that. As far as we move forward, and if we do, let's look at maybe hiring a full-time fire chief / EMS director, which wouldn't be a part-time either way, he'd be a full-time person, but he'd wear 2 hats. And that's kind of where I think we would be the most responsible way to go about it, would be, we need to expand, there's no doubt about that. But let's get the Ely fire chief and our fire chief together, but our fire chief would also be the EMS director. So let's look at doing that. That's kind of where I'm at.
I think if we go with the full-time chief, it would let the volunteers know that you're actually got a person who's committed for the long term. Because if you're just part-time, then you're not totally committed. And maybe that would train the volunteers up, that they know that there's a long-range plan with a full-time employee, and maybe it'll add more.
But with that said, is that somebody that is the extra position you were talking about that we fund through the city?
Oh.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, exactly. It would be a full-time position. It would be a full-time county fire chief, but they would be stationed pretty much. They would probably do a lot of their work, entering bills, paying invoices, ordering parts, that kind of thing, from a desk in the city, because they're gonna go out on call if they get a call of the city kind of thing. And then if they get a call go out in the county, because Pat's getting 1 a day or more to the county, that's the man who goes out or woman who goes out and says, all right, guys, gets to McGill, and he rallies his troops there, and he's their chief, and they're expected to see him show up on those calls. You know, that was the idea behind it, but I still agree that the part-time thing is probably not the right way, no matter how we do it, either full-time and standalone, or full-time partnership with the city, but he's a full-time chief.
Getting the emergency services, somebody with their EMT 1 or 2 or whatever, I think is where we've are hurting them most. I think most people have their firefighter 1, firefighter 2, but we're as remote as we are, those EMS things, and from what I understand, part of the problem is how much time, distance-wise, because after they do a run, you've got at least an hour to 2 hours of paperwork.
Yep.
So if there's somebody that can even help with that part.
Replenish the ambulance and get all that stuff going.
Yeah, I mean,
That's the other
the
side
run
of
is
this.
one thing,
To-
but it's the after.
To Gary's point, it's in the letters, you know, you'd almost want to be a more heavier side, an EMS director than a firefighter, because how many, 90% of the calls as well, or more,
Yeah,
many are
exactly.
EMS calls, you know, that the majority of the fires, structure fires tend to happen within the city of Ely, just as a nature. So
Right.
anyway, I'll probably, depending on how you guys vote, I'll bring a job description back to you, because I'm gonna play with it a little bit, and make sure that there's some heavy EMS stuff in there as well.
And I'll tell you, the other thing I think we've gotta get back to looking at is, it kinda goes back to what I was talking about on the training, as far as participation when they're up and running. Volunteerism is tough. Everybody's up, but Pat, you're paying stipends to, on your EMTs, and you're still having a hard time getting volunteers. I mean, it's still a struggle, but I think you're seeing more success than we are. I think we're gonna have to look at a stipend program. I really think that would help, because you've got these people, especially in these outlying areas, they're burning a lot of fuel, they're spending a lot of time, and time is money. And I think that's something that we've gotta consider.
In the past, they've turned it down.
So, this is a difficult, agenda item for me to analyze, because it's so interconnected with everything.
Yeah.
Technically, it's just discussion on how we're gonna go forward with recruiting on, but, you know, all of these things are associated with how we wanna go forward with recruiting. But I think we've had some good discussion. I think Mike is gonna do a job description and bring it back, so maybe, I hate to shut down.
You just ran at me, and
I just,
I could use a motion to let me know
Yes,
what
yeah.
you guys want me, I can't recruit anyone right now until I know what you wanna do, because we don't have currently a fire chief standalone budget.
Before we recruit, I would like to see us put together the job description and and get that whittled to something that we're all comfortable with before we just set out to recruit.
So,
I still think,
is it understood for this discussion as to which way?
no,
Okay.
yeah, I need a motion, I need to know what
Okay.
the majority of the board wants to do. If you say we wanna hire a full-time fire chief, that's all I need to know. Now, council will bring in jobs for a full-time fire chief.
And then how we will incorporate it and work it with the two
Yeah.
programs, we'll figure it out from there.
Yeah,
Is
I'm
that
not
what
gonna
the
have
plan
some
is?
guy standing in front of you next week saying, I wanna hire this guy.
Right.
You know, I'll bring in job description.
Okay.
Can I make a motion to combine what I suggested? Can I make a motion to direct the county manager to recruit for a fire chief / EMS director? Can I do that?
yes.
I'd like to make that motion then and see if I can get a second.
I'll second.
We have a motion from Richard, we have a second from Hank, further discussion?
Yes.
That's usually part of the job description for a fire chief. Traditionally was EMS director, but we'll make sure it's in that. That's fine.
Okay. I just want to know, are you comfortable with that direction in what you need to do?
Yep. Yeah, I can make that happen.
Okay.
Further discussion? Call for the question, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Carried and so ordered. Thank you, everybody, for your input. Move on to item 3, discussion for possible action, approval of monthly financial reports for December 2022. Kathy?
These are just your normal reports. We did, we're doing all the invoicing in the finance office, so we were playing catch up on a few things, so they're a little higher than normal, but other than that,
Okay, motion to approve the monthly financial reports.
We have a motion from Lori, we have a second? Second from Janet. Further discussion? Call for the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Approved unanimously. Now on to number 4, discussion for possible action, approval of budget transfers within within and between functions or programs in a fund that do not increase the total appropriation of the fund or adjust for approved grants, agency funds. Kathy Workman.
Court and I got together and moved some funding around for training and books for training.
Mary, any questions? Entertain a motion?
Motion to approve is presented.
Motion from Lori, do I have a second?
A second.
Second from Janet. Further discussion? Call for the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 4 approved unanimously. Number 5, discussion for possible action, approval of minutes from December 14, 2022 Special Joint County Commission Fire Commission meeting. Do we have any additions, deletions, and or corrections? I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion from Richard, second from Hank. Further discussion? Call for the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the minutes are approved unanimously. And we'll move down to section C, our 9:30, we're a little behind, 9:30 a.m. proposed ordinances. Move on to number 1 here. First reading, discussion only, regarding proposed ordinance 531, bill number 0.1, or 01.11.2023A to amend ordinance 43 as codified in the White Pine County Code Title 11 regulating vehicles and traffic to now include a prohibition on the use of loud vehicle braking systems in designated areas of White Pine County. James Beecher, White Pine County District Attorney.
So this was a concern brought by some citizens from Lund that we're trying to address. And basically, it prohibits the use of brake brakes by large vehicles within a quarter mile of any urban, put that loosely, any kind of residential area. We've copied the structure from other ordinances as far as just identifying Baker, East Ely, and I know East Ely is now in the city of Ely. Just didn't want to have inconsistencies with other ordinances, Lund, McGill, Preston, Cherry Creek. Cherry Creek is the only one that we were kind of debating about because Cherry Creek, where the residents are, isn't right on the highway. So I don't know if that's necessary. That's something that we could modify in the future, or when it's before the commission for approval, they could approve it with or without that section. Totally up to the board on that, but I think this addresses the problems. Ross has been in touch with you guys.
Yes.
And so, if you guys have any questions on it or anything, this is just the first reading, so.
All right, open up for discussion.
I think it was public, maybe, you guys were here before, so.
Yes, we too, for the first one, but anyway, the issue is that we've just gone around town with a petition and got several signatures.
I'm sorry, can you state your name?
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm Mr. Don Grantham, this is my Al Grantham, and we're here basically representing Lund. And then I guess the other communities too have been involved in this prior, going back years back. And so the main issue is just the noise that's involved with the truckers coming in and through Lund. Some of them come in a lot above the speed limit. They see that speed limit sign that's posted in the city of Lund that tells them how fast they're going. There's an electronic sign there. The minute they see that, they're on their Jake brakes, and that's right at the beginning of Lund, on both ends of Lund, north and south. And so when that happens, a lot of those trucks are not muffled. They don't have mufflers on, so they're straight piped. And it rattles windows, it's interrupting, the peace and quiet of the community of Lund in a whole. Even religious services, even during that time, they're using their Jake brakes. It's even interfering with that at some point in time. And so that's what brought it to my attention was, it's really not, I don't know the correct word, but it's really not appropriate. There is a little bit of a downgrade coming into Lund from the south. But as a driver myself, I drove for over 20, 30 years. I'm retired now. But it's not necessary. It's not that steep of a grade to require a Jake brake. If they see a sign, and as an ex-trucker, if they see a sign prior to the community, that there is no Jake brake allowed, it gives them time to slow the rig down without having to use a Jake brake. If it was a 2-3% grade, I could 100% understand doing that with an 80,000-pound load. That would be appropriate, but there's not. There's really no reason for that. And so my sweet wife went around and got 49 signatures out of a community of one, you know, that agree with us, you know, that they're aggravated with it also.
Okay.
So that's kind of where we're at with this, yeah.
Very good. We appreciate you taking the time and making the effort on behalf of your community. That's,
And I think that McGill already has this.
I believe you, yeah, I believe you're right, so, that's,
They don't bother breaking in the gill,
We're-
they still blow right through.
Yeah.
They do.
we were talking about, I just wanted to ask, John, you have, are Jake brakes a problem out in your area?
No, not really on the hill coming from Butte Valley down into
Yeah.
Cherry Creek. We haven't had that much problem with it.
It's not enough that anybody's up in arms and,
Right. Nobody's shooting out tires or anything.
okay, that just, as we work along with this, we're including communities, I just wanted to see, get your input.
I look in, one thing, enforcement. Are we gonna have to have a full-time person in Lund and or Cherry Creek to enforce no Jake brake? Or would it be easier if we moved the signs further out of town, no Jake brakes, and the speed, your speed is 42 miles an hour, the speed limit is 25? I know there's the sheriff's car sitting out there with dead Fred in it.
I haven't seen him write a ticket yet.
We drove by and I figured out that he was.
If you're going to be totally disrespectful, you're not gonna pay attention anyhow, but most truckers are going to see that sign that says, please no Jake brakes, and your speed is 45, you're supposed to be doing 25. Just move a little further out town and see if that doesn't quell it rather than trying to enforce it, because I don't know how the heck you could enforce it at Cherry Creek. And if you're coming from Butte Valley with a load of cattle or sheep, come down that hill, you probably ought to be dragging along once in a while with a chain on it, because it's pretty steep going into town.
Right.
How is this gonna impact?
Enforcement bothers me.
So, the enforcement, so Sheriff Henroy has the responsibility of directing where his people are, when, given the staffing levels and the calls and all that stuff. The enforcement of this sort of thing would likely be more on NHP, if they were willing to enforce it. I haven't spoke with NHP regarding this specific issue. But just like any law out in Lund, it gets enforced the same way. Either there's somebody out there that sees the offense and issues the ticket, or they respond to a call out there, and then they issue essentially what's called a citizen's complaint. And this is where the citizen reports to the police officer that I observed this behavior from this person, and then they can sign the ticket as complainant. And then I will usually bring in a law enforcement officer anyway, but the main thrust of the case would be on that citizen who witnessed it to testify what they saw, how they identified the person and all that. Having the signs out there is a first step. It doesn't mean that people aren't gonna violate. I mean, people speed all the time. Not me, of course, but, you know, so, but having those signs out there would be a step in the right direction, I think. As far as the speed limits itself, we can't change that, out in the county on
That's all in now,
highway
yeah.
roads, So,
And
what we
working
can
in those
change,
with the signage, right?
we can change, yeah, but we can change the distance. Ross came up with a 1/4 mile in conjunction with
You did.
these folks, just to see what would be a reasonable distance from the town to have that enforced. But we can change that within reason, certainly.
Like, at the end of the day, this ordinance is going to reduce it. Just getting the signs up is going to reduce it. You know, if
Absolutely.
just passing a law eliminated everything, we wouldn't have murder, right? I mean, those things, but we've got to have realistic expectations. We're gonna reduce the number of times your windows are gonna get rattled, but it's not gonna stop it
It's not,
completely.
just like anything.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then,
But I do know that, you know, if at such time there's a highway patrolman in the area, he cites somebody, 1 or 2, 3 innocent people within the next 3 months, the word gets out quick. Because a lot of those drivers are on the same route all the time, and I'm sure that would definitely help also.
yeah, I think so too, so.
I'm not against the ordinance of no loud noises, that just makes sense.
Right.
But maybe there's a solution that would be more expedient and cost less if we, you know, this law will be enforced, yada, 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 no jake breaks within the city limits or whatever.
Yeah.
And your speed limit, talk to the state about lowering that, or whatever it takes, might solve half of the problem.
Is this gonna affect, Veterans Boulevard? Just above Murray Street where, cause you can use a jake break up there, I think.
No, there's actually signs that, no, there's
There
signs
is,
okay.
prohibiting that, yeah.
Okay.
And that's inside the
That's
city.
city ordinance, but there is a city ordinance and there is signs prohibiting that, so. All right, so what do we have, that's our first reading, so we'll come back on. Now you're gonna have to refresh me on in February for a second, and then
Probably the second meeting in February.
second meeting in February, we'll come back on and, for action and move from there.
Perfect, thank you so much for your help.
Thanks for being here, we appreciate you. All right, move on to item 2, first reading, discussion only regarding a proposed ordinance 532, bill number 01.11.2023B, repealing all of ordinance 502 as codified in Title II, Chapter 2.32 of the White Pine County Code, and thereby dissolving the Regional Planning Commission. Michael Weeble, County Manager.
Yeah, thanks, James.
Yeah, I didn't catch that when I was reviewing this.
Me neither.
I can speak to this. So this is something that we put in an extra layer of government about 3 years ago to see if it would be a good idea to have it, to see if it would help anything. This is just up for discussion on this first reading, just to kind of see the appetite of continuing this. Some of the concerns that I have is it creates a back and forth between two different agencies. It's just another layer of government that could be, in my view, more efficiently run just going to each individual board, which ends up happening anyway, because as you guys have seen, they'll put forward something on the Regional Planning Commission, and then whoever doesn't like the result of that will appeal it to this board, or they'll appeal it to the city board. I don't know if it's ever happened in the city or how often. And then this board will do what it wants, and then it gets re-put on the RPC agenda, and then, the last time this happened, it was threatened to come back to this board, and it was actually threatened that, I don't want to say threatened, but there was an implication that for future litigation was going to be forthcoming anyway. So as far as the mayor's comments about increasing litigation, I mean, that's already a threat with every action that you make.